the black Americans have been the only real diehard Americans here, because we're the only ones who've carried the process through the process. That everyone else has to sort of like skip stages. We're the ones who marched, we're the ones who carried the Bible, we're the ones who carried the flag, we're the ones who tried to go through the courts. And being born American didn't seem to matter. Because we were born Americans, but we still had to fight for what we were looking for. And we still had to go through those channels and those processes.
I don't really care what you have to say. Facts over fiction is the motto relay. Muhammad Ali came up from the clay. Grassroots built up this USA. Now knowing your history, you'll get played. Equip yourself cause you came to slay any opponent that's up in our way. Look at Malcolm X and his delivery.
What is up, everyone? I just need to check my audio before we start. What is up, everyone? I just need to check my audio before we start. All right, audio sounds good. And we are ready to roll, family. Oil and Blood, the Color of Wealth in Tulsa, Oklahoma report, part 4. Quick housekeeping, and then we will get the show on the road. All right, go to etmmediagroupstore.com. That's etmmediagroupstore.com to get your latest merch. All right, if you're on Amazon, shop at Amazon. Click that affiliate link. It is in the description. Reparations Now on Tubi. So check it out there on Tubi or go to reparationsnowdoc.com. That's reparationsnowdoc.com. All right. And also Mr. Uncomfortable. Pre-order the Kindle right now. Coming out soon, most likely in August, so you can check that out. Or go to MrUncomfortable.com. That's MISTER. Uncomfortable.com. Or you can go onto the YouTube page where have some stuff up there you can definitely check out if you would like to. Dealing with relationships and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we are posting content regarding Allensworth down there in Southern California on YouTube. So when you have a chance, please go check that out. And I'd like to give a shout out to a descendant of Colonel Allensworth. I believe his name's Charles Allensworth. So check that out on our YouTube page. So let's get into it, shall we? All right. So we're going to start off with methodology NASCC telephone surveys. All right, one more time, make sure my audio is good. All right, so we're going to start off with methodology NASCC. All right, sounds like we're good to go there. Okay. This report utilizes the National Asset Scorecard for communities of color, data collected to improve understanding of the economic well-being of people of color in several major cities across the United States. The NASCC surveys collect detailed data on assets and debts among subpopulations according to race, ethnicity, and country of origin. The survey instruments were designed primarily to gather information about a respondent's specific assets and liabilities, including financial resources, personal savings, and investment activities at the household level. The Tulsa NASCC survey was conducted via telephone in the Tulsa Metropolitan Statistical Area, MSA, and included the following counties: Creek, Oak, Moogly. So I guess people who are familiar with that word, you probably say it better than I would do. Osage, Pawnee, Rogers, Tulsa, and Wagoner. The data consists of survey respondents from various racial ethnic subgroups: white, black, Hispanic, and Native American, disaggregated by tribe: Cherokee, Muskogee, mixed tribal affiliation, and other tribes. The asset and debt modules of the questionnaire replicate questions used in the panel study of income dynamics, also known as PSID, the longest running national longitudinal household survey that collects data on employment, income, wealth, expenditures, health, marriage, education, and numerous other topics. For the non-asset and debt-based questions, the NASCC surveys replicated many questions found on the multi-city study of urban inequality, MCSUI serve. The MCSUI was a cross-section survey of 4 cities: Atlanta, Boston, Detroit, and Los Angeles, collected from 1991 to 1994 to gather socioeconomic data across the ethnic and racial groups. The data collected includes key demographic characteristics such as age, sex, educational attainment, households, composition, nativity, income, and family background. In addition, financial assets, savings and checking accounts, money market funds, government bonds, stocks, retirement accounts, business equity and life insurance, intangible assets, houses, vehicles, and other real estate. Debts included credit card debt, student loans, installment loans, medical debt, mortgages, and vehicle debt. We estimate net worth by subtracting debts from assets. Okay, debts from assets. Okay. The data also tracks information on remittance behavior, the act of sending assets or other resources abroad. Interesting. Okay. Mostly characterized to support relatives and friends or for families' investments. The survey also includes weights based on familiar characteristics in the U.S. Census Bureau ACS to generate results representative of specific ethnic group characteristics in Tulsa. In this report, we use survey weights in our regression and decomposition analysis to produce estimates that are representative of the Tulsa MSA. All right, so just a reminder, the MSA means Metropolitan Statistical Area. I need to write that down for myself because that was mentioned is mentioned all throughout. So Metropolitan Statistical Area. All these acronyms. All right. It is essential to highlight some of the limitations of the NASCC data. First, given the detailed data collected on assets and debt types, some variables have missing responses, presenting some challenges. Second, the survey is a cross-section and not longitudinal panel data, providing only a snapshot of the individual households interviewed in 2012. Therefore, historical comparisons cannot be made since only 1 year of data is available. Third, the surveys are not nationally representative because of their focus on comparisons within the Tulsa metropolitan area. Analysis: wealth and income disparities. Much research has focused on how the intentional destruction of the Greenwood community in 1921 served to undermine the prosperity of blacks in Tulsa and pave the way for the wealth disparities we observe today. The destruction of Black Wall Street, which contains a multitude of oral histories and illustrative narratives, documents a thriving black economic district characterized by a great number of black-owned businesses and relative economic autonomy from the white community. However, the Tulsa massacre put a halt to black prosperity. Existing literature also focuses on how contemporary racial disparity in Tulsa reveals the impact of the massacre 100 years ago. The True Cost of the Tulsa Race Massacre, a report by the Brookings Institution, expanded Mercer's study, further analyzed how the massacre impacts the contemporary wealth distribution in Tulsa. The paper concludes that Tulsans in black majority neighborhoods are largely shut out of jobs in financial firms and institutions. Let me repeat that. The paper concludes that Tulsans in black majority neighborhoods are largely shut out of jobs in financial firms and institutions. Black people, comprising 10% of the Tulsa metropolitan population, only own, oh my gosh. Man, I gotta take a drink. Hold on a second. Reparations. All right. Black people comprising 10% of the Tulsa metropolitan population own only a whopping 1.25% of the area's 20,000 businesses. Repeat that one last time and we will continue. Black people comprising 10% of the Tulsa metropolitan population own only 1.25% of the area's 20% businesses. Close to 30% of Black residents who live in North Tulsa account for over 1/3 of the people in poverty in the city. Similarly to this study, the case for reparations comparatively assesses majority Black North Tulsa and majority white South Tulsa in well-being, unemployment, infrastructure, etc. It finds that the unemployment rate for Black Tulsans is 2.4 times the rate for white people. Furthermore, the differences in life expectancy, poverty rates, and education between North and South Tulsa are significant. While the above literature well documents the current racial differences in economic well-being across Tulsa, the drivers of these differences have not been fully explored empirically. In this section, we estimate racial disparities in wealth and income, and we use the Oaxaca blinder decomposition method to examine the drivers of these differences. All right. So I need to write that down real quick. Oaxaca blinder decomposition method. All right. I have no idea what that is, but I'm going to find out, and hopefully, if I have a chance, report back on that. So if you do know what that is, please leave a comment, and we greatly appreciate that. We also compare the estimated Black-white wealth gaps in Tulsa to Black-white wealth gaps in other NASCC cities to determine if outcomes are substantially worse for Blacks in Tulsa, given the intentional destruction of Black wealth generated by the Tulsa massacre. Descriptive statistics, wealth, income, and other characteristics. All right, just need to pause real quick just to make sure every once in a while that my audio is good. Other characteristics. All right, cool, we're good. All right, 5.1, descriptive statistics, wealth, income, and other characteristics. We start our analysis by providing general descriptive statistics by racial, ethnic groups and comparing these to white Tulsans. Table 2 provides the unweighted summary statistics for our key variables used for our decomposition, broken down by broad racial ethnic groups. Wealth is defined as total assets minus total liabilities or debt. Household income is the sum of all earnings from all household members. While earnings are the earnings of the head of the household, wealth, household income, and earnings are given in 2012 dollar values. Inheritance and gifts is a dummy that equals to one if any member of the household or their parents has received a substantial inheritance or gift from any family or friends, including stocks, homes, and contributions to down payments for a mortgage, help pay for college, or loans without interest. Entrepreneur and self-employed are dummy variables with 1 if true and 0 otherwise. Incarceration exposures is a binary variable with a value of 1 if any household member has been to jail, prison, reformatory school, or youth detention center. We also include standard demographic variables such as age, given in levels, and binary variables for education, marital status, gender, and U.S. born. We find that relative to white households, Black heads of the household tend to be younger, less educated, with 15% having a bachelor's degree or higher, are less likely to be married, 32% versus 70% for whites. The rates for female and U.S. born are similar for both black and white households. For Hispanics, we find that relative to whites, they tend to be younger and have a lower percentage of U.S. born, 51% versus 98% for whites, as expected given the high rate of the immigrant population within the Hispanic community relative to whites nationally. Last but not least, in the case of Native Americans, we find that the demographics are very comparable to those of white households, with only one exception: marriage rate, 51% versus 70% or whites. All right. Table 2, summary stats, white versus black, Hispanic, and Native American households. All right. So here's a chart here. All right. I'm not going to go into it too much. But yeah, you know what? I'm just going to read the top part because it has to deal with wealth. And then if you just want to take a screenshot of the rest, or you can, one day read the report yourself. But since we're here and now, let's just talk about the top part, the wealth part. All right. So the top, row here, whites versus black, whites versus Hispanics, whites versus Native Americans. Okay. All it says 144,588 whites, 21,000. I don't know where that comma is supposed to go. I think maybe that's 213,000. Yeah, that doesn't look right. So let's say the comma is supposed to be in the middle between the 3 and the 0, which I'm assuming that's probably what it is. So let's say 213,075.47. We have black at 19,481. Yeah, the difference is 193,593. We have Hispanic at 82,000, which would leave a difference of 130,000 in the gap. Native American at 190,173, which will leave a difference of 23,000. Okay, so if you notice in this chart, actually, I'm kind of glad we're going over this. The blacks have the highest differential at 193,593. Yeah, so that just might be an error there. All right. Let's continue. In terms of the wealth and income variables, Table 2 shows that the unweighted average wealth in our Tulsa sample is 144,588. However, wealth varies tremendously by racial ethnic groups. For example, the wealth level for white households is 213,075. All right, so that looks like that was corrected in this paragraph here, compared to 19,481 for blacks, 82,204 for Hispanics, and 189,173 for Native Americans. The racial wealth gap is statistically significant between whites and blacks and whites and Hispanics. Surprisingly, the wealth gap is not significant when comparing whites and Native Americans in Tulsa. I'm going to repeat that again. Surprisingly, the wealth gap is not significant when comparing whites and Native Americans in Tulsa. This could be attributed to the earning and potential power of Native Americans specifically, and I'm using that interjecting, in Tulsa. We find similar trends for the household income gaps across the racial ethnic groups with respect to white households. Of note is that in terms of earnings, we find that the earnings gap relatively to white is statistically significant only for black households. Hispanic and Native American families tend to earn statistically the same as white households in Tulsa. Let me repeat that. Hispanic and Native American families tend to earn statistically the same as white households in Tulsa. This highlights the existence of barriers that penalizes Black Tulsans in the local labor markets. We find evidence of compounding effects in other local markets, such as the real estate markets, in which the home ownership rate gap is 38% relative to white households, the largest gap across all of the racial ethnic groups. The finding is important because racial disparities in home ownership tend to amplify other forms of inequalities, given that home ownership affects multiple socioeconomic dimensions, including the quality of the neighborhood and school district, the size of the business loan you are able to qualify for, because homes can be used as collateral for business loans or can be refinanced, etc. Last but not least, as an asset, a home can be passed down as a bequest to family members. Our findings support these hypotheses. In Tulsa, we find white-black gaps in inheritance receivership, 17% point gap, and entrepreneurship rate, 12 percentage point gap. Research shows that inheritance or intergenerational transfers and gifts received from family and friends play an important role in wealth and income generation. By definition, only those generations that own assets can leave a bequest to younger generations. Therefore, as a social construct, wealth is path dependent from a historical perspective and can directly and indirectly affect present levels of the racial wealth and income gaps. By some estimates, bequests and transfers account for at least half of aggregate wealth, have recently averaged 3% of total households' disposable personal income, and can account for more of the racial wealth gap than any other demographic or socioeconomic indicator. This also means that any interruption of wealth building activity that involves a particular group will have future consequences on wealth levels for that specific group with respect to others, such as in the case of the Tulsa massacre. We find corroborative evidence showing that white Tulsan households are twice as likely to receive inheritance or gifts from family and friends. The percentage of white households that reported receiving a substantial inheritance or gift from family and friends is 33% relative to 15% for blacks, the largest gap across all racial ethnic groups and the only statistical significant one. We find no significance for Hispanics or Native Americans. Having an active and healthy entrepreneurial and business ecosystem helps build and maintain wealth within a community. Before 1921, Tulsa was one of the most prominent Black Wall Streets in the United States. Let me repeat that again. Before 1921, Tulsa was one of the most prominent Black Wall Streets in the USA. All right. I'm going out on a limb here. I could be wrong, but I'd probably say it was probably one of the most prominent communities in the United States, black or white. Could be wrong though, but let's continue. With a very active business community, today we find that the entrepreneurship rate for whites is 6.5 times larger than that of blacks, 13% versus 2% respectively, and the gap is statistically significant. This gap is similar to the gap for Hispanics who have moved to Tulsa in recent decades. However, we find no significant gap between whites and Native Americans in terms of entrepreneurship rates. All right. On the other hand, an impediment to building wealth and income is incarceration. One channel through which incarceration affects wealth is through the interruption of earnings. Additionally, having an incarceration record reduces future employment opportunities and hence future income for the affected family member and the household. Recent research finds that incarceration exposure reduces household income and disproportionately affects Black communities. Although not statistically significant, we find that Black households are twice as likely to be exposed to incarceration, with 20% of respondents stating that at least one of the people within the household has been to jail, prison, or a juvenile correctional facility. Our findings show that incarceration exposure is a concern disproportionately affecting Native Americans. We find statistically significant incarceration exposure for Native Americans relative to white households, with 28% of Native Americans reporting incarceration exposure compared to only 10% of white Tulsa households. In other words, Native Americans are 2.8 times more likely to experience incarceration exposure than white households. All right, so as we can see on this chart here, Table 3, Wealth and Earnings, Summary Statistics. All right, let's start with the left here. It says wealth. Median is whites 78,000, blacks 50,000, Hispanics 8,800, and Native Americans 57,000. Household income median for whites 50,000, blacks 22,000, Hispanics 30,000, and Native Americans 34,000. Earnings, whites 31,000, blacks 9,000, Hispanics 22,000, and Native Americans 32,000. Now, it's possible that outlier households or super rich Tulsans drive the wealth and income gaps shown in Table 2. Therefore, in Table 3, we provide the point estimate of the median across wealth, household income, and earnings among different ethnic groups. We find that while the wealth of whites remains the greatest at 78,000, followed by Native Americans at 57,000, the wealth of blacks and Hispanic households significantly lag behind with a median wealth of 5,000 and 8,800 respectively. For household income and earnings, the relation between different ethnic groups remains the same, but the gap of household earnings between whites, blacks, and Hispanics are narrower, with white households having a median household income of 50,000 compared to 22,000 for blacks and 30,000 for Hispanics. Native Americans show a median household income of 34,000. These results indicate that all groups suffer from large outlier effects, which push the means reported in Table 2 to the right. The outlier wealth effect is larger for Hispanics and blacks. Table 4 provides a summary statistics and compares whites to members of different tribes. One interesting finding is that Native American households of mixed tribes or that claim no single tribe affiliation tend to have the largest wealth level. I'm going to read that again. One interesting finding that Native American households of mixed tribes or that claim no single tribe affiliation tend to have the largest wealth level, even larger than white households in Tulsa. So, I mean, what would be interesting in this case, right? And I don't know if this report is going to say this, and we'll probably stop at the end of this paragraph to see if these people are actually mixed with Black Americans or if they're mixed with white people. Like, that would be very interesting, because that would just show, the point that I think, people always make, the access to whiteness, right? Let's continue. Muskogee Native Americans tend to have the lowest level of wealth with a mean wealth of 53,892. In contrast, Cherokee and other tribe households have similar wealth to white households with 180,738 and 180,189 respectively. Therefore, a surprising result is that we find statistically significant wealth and household earning differences between whites and Muskogee only, and not for any of the other groups when compared to white households. Muskogee households also lag behind whites and other Native American tribes in home ownership, entrepreneurship, and education. Our findings show that incarceration exposure primarily affects Cherokee, other tribes, and the mixed or no tribe households. Muskogee households have similar incarceration exposure as white households. In terms of marital status, only mixed or no tribe affiliation households are different from white households, with only 40% reporting being married compared to 70% for white households. We find that white and Native American households across different tribes in our sample are very similar in inheritance and gifts received, self-employment, age, gender, and U.S. born. All right, so we are going to stop there because we are at the half-hour mark, and we will continue. Let's see we will be continuing with. All right, looks like there's a couple of charts. 5-2 comparison to other NASCC cities. Interesting. All right. So that is page 22 on my copy here, but that is 19 here on this page. So we will stop there and continue on page 19 tomorrow. All right. Thanks everyone for joining on the live and then on the replay. Really appreciate you for joining. Good evening, family. Praying all is well with you. You too, Elliot Hopkins. Thank you for joining. All right, family. That is it. And we will see you next time right here on Emend the Mass Media Group. And let's see. I'm going to put this up real quick. This is Oil and Blood. Oil and Blood, the Color of Wealth in Tulsa, Oklahoma report. Read, series, and review. We actually might have a show this upcoming Sunday. There is going to be an upcoming hearing, actually a couple next week. So we'll keep everybody up to date and uninformed, informed about what's going on here, family. All right. So you guys have a wonderful evening as you guys take care of yourselves, you and your family, and enjoy this evening. And we will show you. Man, okay, now it's really time to get off. I'm starting to stumble here. All right, we'll see you next time. All right, as always, family, peace and reparations.
The way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but free people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay? You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations, allows for the construction of these policies and practices and systems and structures that continue to oppress us. This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Now listen, If you can't handle the TR roof, don't tune in.